I love cutting people off. I'll cut you off for no reason and not even tell you. By the time you notice, you'll send me a text and it won't even go through. And the problem is, the older I get, the easier it gets, so nobody's safe.
In this era where we find it so easy to cut people off for trivial reasons, I'm going to put myself on the chopping block and say that the pendulum has swung too far. Because if cutting people out of our lives is a repeated pattern, at some point we need to take accountability and realize that the common denominator is us.
Hey guys, welcome back. I feel so excited to be back. This is so exciting. I've literally only been away for 3 weeks. Today we are unpacking a topic that's one of my favorite things to talk about. We're talking all things platonic love, the nuclear family, capitalism, all the juicy things, all the juicy content. Obviously, if you have tuned into my content before, welcome back. I got a haircut. I chopped it all off, babes. Like, it's crazy. It was down here. I haven't actually cut my hair, as in I cut it short, since I was like 15, which is we're pushing 10 years. We're pushing 10 years. And like, this feels crazy. I'm not going to lie. I've been in a bit of a crisis. Okay. I think it's just me getting used to having short hair and not knowing how to style it. And just like every time I walk past a mirror type beat, I'm like, oh my God, who is that? So, it's just like the teething phase. I definitely, if you are a short hair girly, props to you. And please send me like how to style. I feel like I need styling inspiration because I feel like, I don't know, like this is a cute little styling moment, but I just don't know what to do. And I don't know how to make it look, because it's very layered. I don't know how to make it like look good. I just don't know, guys. I don't know. And I've been looking at all these beautiful girlies on Instagram styling their hair with all these tools, and I'm like, do I need to go invest in a bloody Dyson? Probably not. I'm not going to be doing that. I don't know. Maybe we should get Dyson to sponsor me because I need help. Guys, please. It's me from the future. I wanted to jump in here and say how exciting it is that From the Diving Board was actually selected as part of the Radar Creator Program here on Spotify. Basically, it means that now my podcast is going to be promoted by Spotify, particularly Spotify Australia. It is such an exciting milestone for the podcast. I genuinely can't believe how much this community is supporting me. You guys and your connection is just amazing. It is so cool. And I honestly want to say, I don't necessarily put this down to just me. I think that this is collective action. Guys, because you have shown me that you're interested in these nuanced topics, interested in nuanced conversation. And what I love about this podcast and doing this podcast is that it doesn't actually ever feel like a one-sided conversation. Like, the insights that I get from you at the end of each episode, the way that you engage is so amazing and special. And I just have so much to owe and so much to thank you guys for. It is such an exciting journey that we're on right now. And a huge thank you to Spotify for supporting the podcast. And I'm so excited to see where this goes. So on Spotify, you can search Radar Creators and find the pod under Radar Australia. And there is a curated playlist of all your favorite episodes listed. So you can head on over there if you're new. From the Diving Board is a show hosted by me, charlichats, dedicated to decoding digital culture by unpacking the hidden politics behind the screen. In 2023, the New York Times coined the term the buddy moon. Basically, why limit your honeymoon to just you and your new partner? Bring along your mates, make it a party. For Hannah Smothers and her new partner, Marshall, this is exactly what they did, and she wrote about it in The Cut. She wrote that after their wedding, they wanted to extend the party and basically extended out an invitation to 8 of their besties, hired out a villa in France. She wrote that actually she found that this experience was potentially even more romantic than had it just been with her partner, which she said was even more significant because a lot of them were in their mid-30s and didn't really have that much time to actually hang out with each other on a day-to-day basis. Although various articles have recently cropped up about this phenomenon and about the buddy moon, it is still very much a small, isolated situation, and not that many people actually do follow through with one. And I think this is fair enough, given that for a lot of people, honeymoons are really the only time in a couple's life that they actually get that time away from all of their responsibilities at home, that they have that one-on-one quality time holiday, basically. Yet in an era where many people are seeing their friends less, particularly as they enter the workforce and start to scatter out into their nuclear families, as well as a time which is known for being in a loneliness epidemic, the buddy moon and prioritizing platonic love seems like a great countercultural movement. It also radically contrasts the ingrained hierarchical levels of relationships and love that we have in our society, with romantic relationships at the pinnacle and platonic even below family relationships in many societies, which then just causes a lot of people to lose touch with friends once they enter these nuclear family dynamics, marry, settle down, have kids, etc. And while, as I said, the buddy moon is still quite an isolated situation and not everyone is actually going to follow through and have a buddy moon for themselves, I think this speaks to a wider prioritization of platonic love in a society that hasn't really given much time or energy to platonic love in recent years. And so I want to unpack the value of platonic love and why we should really start looking at prioritizing platonic love and friendship over romantic love. In fact, I would even argue, I might even go as far to argue that maintaining and cherishing your friendships is an act of quiet activism and rebellion against individualistic capitalism. So, with all that in mind, let's dive into the episode. When associating the words capitalism and love or romance, most people would think of Valentine's Day, which I think is pretty fair. I mean, fine, twist my arm, buy me gifts, I'm not going to say no, but also I think there's a lot of issues with Valentine's Day that a lot of people have. I mean, it's ultimately almost the pinnacle of late-stage capitalism, given it attempts to monetize something that honestly can't really be monetized. We don't even really, from a scientific perspective, we still don't really even understand what love is. And a lot of philosophers still believe love to be an almost like metaphysical thing, a supernatural thing, something that no one can really explain. It's interesting then that despite all this, Valentine's Day has somehow commodified it and turned it into something that can be measured through dollars. Well, obviously, hopefully in your day-to-day life, you don't actually believe that someone loves you more if they buy you more things. Perhaps a more significant example of the interaction between love and capitalism is marriage. I mean, it doesn't get much more capitalist than transferring ownership of a woman from their father to their new husband, does it? Sorry, I had to throw that one in there. Back in the day, though, marriage was pretty transactional. I mean, particularly before industrialization, families in general were like little firms. It was how you made a living for yourself. You all had to work together, and the family unit was kind of considered a little production unit. Families were largely in charge of their own production. So, for example, if your family happened to be in a lineage of blacksmiths, you would kind of want as many kids to support you and support your ability to contribute blacksmithing to your community and to make some money from that so that you could then go out and trade and buy other goods and services to support yourselves and your family too. Your production as a family unit was essential for your survival. And so a lot of people, when considering marriage, were really just considering it from quite a survival practical perspective. Love wasn't really involved, especially for the working class. It was very much a privilege that was reserved for people who didn't have economic concerns. Your main considerations was really how many children can you have. Your kids were like your unpaid labor, which, I mean, fast fashion really saw that and went, copy paste sis. I love that idea. Did I lie? Yet following industrialization, now that people could work in factories and make wages, the family unit became more of a consumption unit rather than a production unit. And although money was still very essential for survival, if not more so, because now you were having to consume pretty much everything, you couldn't really produce anything for yourself, families became smaller. Families have never really been immune from economic pressures, so for a lot of people, marriage was a potential way out of poverty, especially if you were marrying someone who had more money than you. As economies grew, people had less and less children, and in fact, this phenomenon has been studied on multiple different occasions, particularly with research done in the 19th century by French researcher Lepay. Basically, he said that the shifting family dynamic from from broader extended families to smaller nuclear families was very much in relation to and because of urbanization and industrialization. And he says that this posed significant risks for parents who were then often left without care as they grew older. He had very strong moral reservations about what it meant now that the extended family wasn't like supporting each other through all stages of life. There is actually broader research that suggests that as economies grow, families become smaller as well, which I think is quite interesting. And I think it's really important to pause here and just note how capitalism is just a system of your economy, is just the way that we kind of produce and consume and how our markets are able to function. And yet evidently it trickles down into every single aspect of our lives, to the extent to the way that we organize private lives, to the way that we decide how many children we want to have, how we set up our family unit is still so heavily influenced by capitalism. In many ways, marriage actually does still remain a mechanism for survival, particularly because not just financially, but marriage can permit things like access to a visa or access to social payments, for example. It's also historically been a privilege that's only been afforded to monogamous heterosexual folk due to its patriarchal and religious origins, which then has been weaponized by the state to basically suggest what is a legitimate partnership and what isn't. Now, I mean, in modern day, of course, many people do find love and then get the benefit of a dual income, but it's not a huge surprise that a lot of people fall out of love but still remain in those partnerships because it's simply so expensive to be single in these times. The single tax is a real thing. From rising rent costs to everyday cost of living, it's just more like economical to benefit from economies of scale and to share the burden of your everyday finances with someone else. Social welfare benefits as well are often designed to benefit families and couples over single people. And of course, there are benefits specific to single parents, but they often don't really provide sufficient support for those single parents, and there's a lot of criticisms leveraged against them. This then has disproportionate impacts on women in particular, who tend to live on their own more so than men. But it is really important to note that in Australia, at least, men are disproportionately represented in statistics in homelessness, and they may struggle to receive welfare benefits more so than women due to the more family focus that welfare benefits tend to kind of have. And yet, despite all of this, recent research, particularly in Australia, shows that single-person households are on the rise. By 2046, it's actually predicted that 28% of all households will be lived in by a single person, which is just kind of absurd when you actually think about it. 1 in 3 houses in Australia will only have one person living there. That seems crazy given what I was talking about before about costs of living being on the rise. That doesn't really marry up. Like, what are we missing here? And perhaps modern dating culture has become too much of a tumultuous battlefield for us to withstand, and we've decided, no, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm not having part of that, and I'm living on my own, and it doesn't matter how much money I'm spending. So let's talk about modern dating culture quickly for a second. 21st century dating is literally no joke. Dating apps are literally leading us to swipe left or right based on physical characteristics, as if we were literally picking out what hair product we want to buy from the supermarket. In a really great video I watched recently by ThoughtBug on YouTube, highly recommend her content by the way, she did a commentary on Married at First Sight, and she notes that reality TV has only further intensified the way that we view potential matches, with language like my type, and particularly on Love Island, where the people's heads are literally perpetually turning. I'm like, you guys, the whiplash that you must be feeling right now is crazy. I think we can all relate to the fact that one of the biggest struggles with modern dating is that no one wants to commit to anything. We're always in a perpetual situationship, and no one is able to communicate what they actually want. It feels like it's very transactional, and we're constantly keeping keeping ourselves kind of available because there might be something better coming along, which in my view has a very market capitalist mentality to it. But to be honest, a lot of people are actually throwing in the towel and quitting dating for these reasons, but there are more serious reasons as well. For example, domestic violence rates are on the rise. Genuine fears of people's safety, particularly when in a monogamous relationship with a man, are legitimate fears. In fact, there's research to show that for a lot of people who are in relationships with men, the most dangerous person to them is the man they're in a relationship with. As is on the rise, and also we're seeing a really strong level of misogyny, and we're seeing these really traditional backwards notions of gender. There's this idea of men being superior to women, which generally creates the conditions that, facilitate dangerous mindsets, dangerous behaviors, and fundamentally a lack of respect among men for women. And when I say this, I don't mean I'm not saying if you're a man watching this or you're in a relationship, I'm not saying that this is most likely, because there are so many incredible men, and we really need to be uplifting those men right now. But we are in a situation where these harmful views are kind of coming into the mainstream a little bit. This has then led to movements like the 4B movement, which started back in 2017 in South Korea, which basically is a voluntary movement to not be in relationship with men. So it's the 4Bs stand for the 4 no's, which are do not date men, do not marry men, have sex with men, or have children with men. And it's a direct response to this risk of domestic violence that a lot of women are facing right now. And there was another spike last year following the Trump election in the United States, with a lot of people in the US undertaking the movement and becoming part of the movement in protest to that election result. But even if you are dating in the modern world, you might be less inclined at the moment to actually follow a nuclear family structure. The concept of the nuclear family has been widely debated from many angles, but particularly in queer and trans communities, because a lot of these people argue that the family is quite exploitative for those who have been made responsible for caring for others, as well as often being legitimately dangerous for women, children, queer, and trans people. In the 1970s in the United States, this idea of family values was really put forward as kind of the core thing that the US government was trying to portray. It was this idea that if we just instill good family values, society will get back to a good place of democracy. It's been widely debated what this actually means, and it has very strong roots in patriarchy, this idea of a good family. The subtext is these families are white, heteronormative families with children. And it's actually quite interesting that the United States is so heavy on promoting these family values, which have come back as ideologies have come back as well. And yet we're seeing over in the United States, we're seeing undocumented immigrant families being split up like there's no care in the world about the value of those families. We don't see the same level of protection for families of immigrants, for families of people who don't resemble this particular white American dream family that was meant when the United States was talking about family values. So this brings me to examine a different type of relationship, and that is friends, platonic love. Let's get into it. Platonic love and friendship has historically been deemed secondary, at least to romantic, intimate relationships. And I do think this is very, very interesting in the context that I was kind of building before about how the nuclear family really benefits individualistic capitalism, benefits capitalism for people to be organized in kind of isolated family units. When a romantic partnership and the nuclear family unit is at the core center of your life, it's not that you're avoiding your friends, it's that finding time for friendship is genuinely so difficult. Like juggling, attending your 9 to 5 or whatever work situation you're in, then also your caring obligations at home, particularly if you have children as well. There just isn't time to be able to hang out with your friends. In 2015, a Pew Research report actually found that more than half of parents surveyed said they didn't have enough time away from their children to hang out with their friends. And so in our modern day culture, instead, we'll go on social media, have this illusion of social contact, probably then go off social media and feel worse about ourselves because we're not actually engaging with our friends. Or we'll send a message into the group chat, which probably won't make it out the group chat for another 4 months. The classic situation where you leave like an institution like school or uni, you want to hang out with all your friends, you're like, great, we have so much time now that we're not, caught up in classes and stuff. And then your message goes unread for like 2 months because everyone's so busy. It's going to take 17 business days for you to actually find a 2-minute spot in your schedule where you can hang out in a parking lot. You know what I mean? And also, even if you stay single, your friends are probably quite likely to partner up in relationships. You can't hang out with them anyway, you know what I mean? So it's like a lose-lose, really, isn't it, for platonic love out here? And I will raise my hand and say, I'm guilty as charged. I'm bad for this one. Like, I do tend to spend a lot of time with my boyfriend because we live together and stuff. But actually, since we've been living together, I have been trying to prioritize spending more time with my friends because I know that we live together. So it's almost been better that we live together. But before we lived together, it was, you want to spend time with your partner. So when you do finally have that slice of 2 hours, you'll like hit up your partner rather than your friends, which is something that I've been trying to work on. Hopefully I'm not like outing myself as the worst friend ever.
Wow. Next question. See ya.
And this is obviously very unfulfilling for many, particularly in an era where we are feeling more disconnected, lonely, alone, whatever you want to call it. And also, if we are expecting all of the social energy from a singular partner, we're going to be unfulfilled. One person can't bring you everything that you need. We're social animals. We need community. We can't expect a community from one single person. The nuclear family just isn't sufficient to meet our needs. Communities instead require diverse perspectives, different levels of connection with people. We need those weaker tie friendships just the same way that we need stronger tie connections. And this was something that I spoke about in a recent video when I was talking about my solo travels, and I discussed the concept of weak tie friendships, this idea that those people that you see on a regular basis, like the barista that you go to or the regular person that you see on your commute, those tiny interactions are actually really, really important for our level of happiness. Late stage capitalism has us prioritizing individualism over everything. And yet, ironically, in prioritizing our individualism from this capitalist perspective, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice because we're not fulfilling ourselves from a social perspective. So although friendships may be seen as inferior to romantic relationships, they definitely do hold a very significant position in our emotions, feelings, and just who we are as people. I think a really evident example of this is just how significant friendship breakups feel. Like, I can vouch from an anecdotal personal perspective that friendship breakups can sometimes feel a million times worse than a romantic breakup, because I think that we're socialized to kind of understand that relationships, as in romantic relationships, aren't necessarily going to last, particularly in modern day. Particularly I'm talking my generation, Gen Z. We understand that a lot of our relationships are kind of plagued with these issues of non-commitment and situationships. And so although we might want to believe that the person that we're with is going to be the person that we're going to stay with forever, especially at the early stages of dating, we have kind of these warning signs in our mind that maybe the romantic relationship isn't going to go anywhere. Whereas with friendships, you usually believe that friendships are for life. And so when your trust has been betrayed, or when something happens in a friendship that leads to a breakup, sometimes that can cut a lot deeper because we're not expecting that kind of situation. Friendships are far more ambiguous, say, than romantic relationships, and they don't follow a structure. It's not like you hang out with a friend after one hangout and then visualizing a future with them and all the different stages that you're going to have with them. There's no real milestones in friendships, I would say, unlike romantic relationships where you have literal phases and there's milestones to meet, etc. Unless you're a weirdo or a social climber or a psychopath or a sociopath, all of the above maybe even, you probably don't have very transactional friendships either. I think that there is something to be said about the authentic connection that you have have with a friend, because usually, I caveat here, I understand it's not always like this and there are power dynamics at play, but usually in a healthy friendship, maybe is a better way of putting it, there won't be a power dynamic. You'll both feel quite, even in your ability to come to each other and hang out and talk about the things you want to talk about and have fun and play. Literally play. Like, friendship is play. I think that's important to say. Like, friendship is just fun, and that should be the core of friendship, is having fun. And it's not like there's, a transactional thing that you're both getting from each other, hopefully. Usually it's just to enjoy the moment, to do something fun together, and that's it. But this idea of literally putting your happiness in the now above everything else, of hanging out with a friend just because you want to have fun, is actually very anti-capitalist, because capitalism has us socialized to kind of invest in ourselves now for our future selves later. Alan Sears has written that friendship is the first to go when the demands of paid work and family increase. We have this weird hierarchy in our heads that suggests that we have to prioritize, this investment, this hard work over having fun with our friends. And I'm not saying, I totally understand this. I'm not saying it's bad to do this. I do this. Like, it's important to invest in your future, living under capitalism as we are now. It's important to work hard. It's important to prioritize your family. It's important to invest for your future self. But there isn't any harm in hanging out with your friends here and now to just have some fun and prioritize your happiness in the now as well. I think it's also worth saying that for many marginalized people or oppressed people, friendship is a lifeline. I did a video recently on gossip, and I was talking about how for a lot of women, gossip channels and gossip networks and this bonding and friendship that is then kind of created as a result between women is often necessary to warn other women of potential predators, of potential abusers in the workplace, of potential names of people who have been harmful to watch out for. This is also the case for workers as well, for Black, Brown, Indigenous people. Friendship offers a connection and an essential support network system for people who are disenfranchised by political systems and social culture. So, because of the obvious benefits of platonic love, there actually seems to be a bit of a swing among Gen Z away from romantic love and towards platonic friendships instead. In a study by a dating app called Yuzu, it released information finding that 83% of respondents last year to their survey, who are all identify as Gen Z, value friendship over romantic relationships. They wrote that for many, the support and companionship offered by friends are seen as equally, if not more fulfilling than romantic partnerships. And if you actually think about it, share houses as well are really on the rise at the moment, which may be out of economic necessity, but it's also redefining how we visualize our lives and our futures away from this nuclear family situation. And I was talking to my boyfriend about this actually, because we live in a share house with one of his friends. And I think it's really interesting that out of economic necessity, right, our generation is struggling to live the same lives as our parents and as our grandparents. It's much harder for us to, by the same kind of age, buy a house, save for a down payment, meet all our bills, cost of living, etc. And so a lot more of us are living in shared accommodation for far longer than maybe our parents would have or their parents would have. And this is because of, rising cost of living, wage stagnation, the fact that the purchasing power of our wage is just simply not the same as our parents or grandparents who bought houses for £30. No, I'm kidding, I'm joking, but seriously, they really benefited from capitalism. Capitalism did work for a period of time for certain people, but we're now in this late stage where it's not working for us anymore. The, cookie cutter way of life isn't actually working, isn't actually able to provide what was kind of promised to us. And so isn't it funny that as a result, we're then living in shared accommodation out of economic necessity, which brings back ultimately community. I feel like I have spoken about the need for community before, and I've spoken about how to solve kind of a lot of our political problems as well. Community needs to be at the forefront of our minds as a result of this kind of really bad situation we're living in right now, the difficulties of the economy. We may naturally get that community mindedness through shared living spaces that then redefine how we visualize our futures away from this individualistic nuclear family. It's possible that we go, wait, this communal way of living is actually really cool. Let's keep this going. Let's, keep pushing. There is also research to show, though, that people who decide to raise children are intentionally living near their friends so that they can raise them in a more community-minded way. And I think it's worth also just noting here that this is a very Western idea. Like in a lot of non-Western cultures, it's still the norm to live with your extended family and not in these tiny micro nuclear family situations. And so raising a child in a community-minded way is still very, very, very much at the forefront. And I really understand this from particularly even just being in Tonga, for example, this idea of the nuclear family is just not as strong. In fact, the notion of the chosen family has been written about by Kath, Weston, in her book called Families We Choose, which was published back in 1991. And she wrote that friendships, as well as queer relationships, open space for relationships that are more inventive and responsive to the needs of the participants, even as those needs change over time. They're more oriented towards pleasure, safety, and support in the present than an investment in a future which looks remarkably like the past, a future of marriage, children, and home ownership. In other words, a future of capitalist reproduction. For these reasons, friendships are ultimately almost a threat to the continued existence of late-stage capitalism and conforming to the nuclear family way of life. As a result, in many circles, friendship itself is politicized. I think it's important to state that according to Luc de Noronha, he wrote that many friendships among young Black men are politicized and demonized as being somehow related to organized crime or gangs. Also, if you think about like the way that mums, like yummy mummies and stay-at-home mum friendships can be demonized as well. This idea is that they, hang out together while their kids are at school, and there's this stigma that they're not really contributing to society when actually they're contributing to their family in probably doing all the care work, probably doing so much work to facilitate their family unit, which then benefits their husband when their husband goes to work if they're living in a cis-het family dynamic. So it's just interesting how hanging out with friends actually is demonized in certain contexts among certain groups. But it's not like friends are immune and friendship is immune from the shackles of capitalism. I mean, unfortunately, clearly nothing is. That capitalist demon has got its little claws on everything, okay? And as I've covered, the market mentality that we have adopted so heavily has obviously swarmed into our friendships too. If you think about online, particularly in recent years, this whole idea of cutting people off that don't serve you.
I love cutting people off. I'll cut you off for no reason and not even tell you.
This line really grinds my gears because first of all, the word serve makes it sound like your friends should be a slave to you, which is just weird. Cutting people off, I just don't like it. I don't like this idea. I think obviously there are certain contexts where it's very important to leave unhealthy, toxic relationships, regardless of if they're platonic, familial, romantic, whatever. Like it's important to free yourself from dangerous, unhealthy dynamics. But I think that this language, this therapy speak has really infiltrated a lot of conversation online about friendship to the point that people are saying to cut off people because they gave you a lactose coffee when you're actually lactose intolerant. Just weird things like that where it's okay, but did they just make a mistake? Or could you have maybe just had a conversation about it? Could you have addressed this conflict in a way that didn't have to be so dramatic? Because the more we just cut people off, the more isolated we become. Again, it's not to say you shouldn't cut people off that are genuinely harmful, that genuinely don't make your life better. But there's something to be said about the willy-nilly use of setting boundaries. Oh my God, that's another one. Boundaries. I actually can't. And also, I think it's also dangerous to overuse words that have legitimate meanings in legitimate contexts where they need to hold weight. Boundaries should really be defined as very significant conditions to ensure your genuine safety, rather than your friend forgot to bring your keys that you left at their house, and then suddenly they've crossed a boundary for like ignoring you or something. Anyway, I feel like I'm just waffling.
Next question.
Transactional friendships exist, unfortunately, and unfortunately this market mentality has extended itself over to friendships. And so what I wanted to do was I asked on Instagram for you guys to send me your most intense transactional relationship situations you've been in a friendship specifically, just to read out, because I do think like it's sad. This whole situation is sad that we are viewing other fellow people in this way, in a transactional way. It's deeply disturbing, but it's also kind of funny because it's just funny from an absurd perspective. I hope you guys understand. A lot of my sense of humor is like, I laugh at things when they're absurd. What in the world is happening? Like, this is crazy that people are viewing other people in this way. And I gave the example of when I was 4 years old. Yes, that is 4 years old. I had made this friend at preschool and I thought we were besties, and I rock up the next day wearing my coolest t-shirt ever, which is a bananas in pajamas t-shirt. Iconic moment. She says she doesn't want to be my friend anymore because I am wearing a baby t-shirt, as in like not a baby tee, iconic, a baby tee as in you look like a baby, and she didn't want to be associating with a baby. This 4-year-old was like, I'm way too old for that, girl, I'm way too old for that, and then she ditched me. So that's an example of a very early stage transactional relationship that I did share, but I wanted to read out some of yours because some of them were wild. Like, I was like, guys, are you okay? Anyway, let's get them up. Someone, note this one actually made me laugh so hard. I lent my AirPods to my friend only for her to cut me off when I asked for them back. Sorry. What? Crazy behavior. In my first year of uni, I went on a booze cruise with this girl, and then she ran into some of her private schoolmates and ditched me completely. Luckily, I knew other people there. That is not on behavior. You should not be leaving your friends ever. That is not okay. When I came out in middle school, you would have thought I had caught contagious disease. The way those avoided me like the plague. That is also really disturbing as well. The way that young people in school can be so brutally mean is genuinely scary. In year 3, a girl became my friend just to get to my twin brother she had a crush on. Oh my god. A friend told me who I could and couldn't talk to so that we would get further up the food chain. Oh, that's gross. A friend gifting me a toy wrapped up in everything and then asking for it back. Wait, what? A friend basically created our friend group, and when we fell out, I stopped getting invited to stuff. Same friend also stayed friends with people she didn't seem to like to have college party connections. It's just embarrassing. And you know what's sad is that a lot of these people won't have any friends anymore. The irony of them prioritizing social climbing behaviors in this transactional way. People clock transactionality. People actually don't want to be surrounded by you if you're not authentic. It's not cool. It's not a vibe. You're going to end up with literally no friends. Like, it's just the irony of it all that these people are very likely to be feeling the most lonely of all because they haven't treated the people in their life with any morsel of respect. It's really sad that people view other people in this way because ultimately you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot if you're going to treat people like that. But also, as Jojo Siwa would say, karma is a bitch. And that's on that. But anyway, we're coming to the end of the video. And I just wanted to kind of end off with this notion that I think that genuinely centering platonic love and friendship is going to be the way that we can start creating community again, and we can sort of move away from these individualistic capitalist mindsets that are so centered around the nuclear family that ultimately aren't even really benefiting us in society at the moment. Community is what is going to help us to really connect with people, feel less lonely, alone, disconnected. Beat your phone addiction too. I don't know if you guys also agree, but whenever I'm hanging out with my friends, I am never on my phone. Like, if I go up and stay with my friends in a different city, I will go on my phone maybe 2 minutes a day. That's a lie. But I'm barely on my phone because I'm so stimulated by the social connection that I'm having. And I think that's really interesting to add in there too when we're living in this like literal time of phone addiction addictions, one of the ways to try and beat that is to hang out with your friends more often. But yeah, if we keep going on this capitalist trajectory with very limited time and most of our lives dedicated to earning for our future and caring for those in our nuclear families, we're only further removing ourselves from friendship and platonic love, which is a really big loss. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I'm really interested in your thoughts, whether or not you think, whether or not you agree that this is sort of the end of the nuclear family as we know it, whether or not you would live with your friends. Would you marry your friends? Would you have a buddy moon? Tell me everything. Can you visualize yourself living with your friends, buying houses with your friends? Or is the nuclear lifestyle still kind of something that you're working towards and something that you want for yourself? I'm intrigued. I'm interested. Let me know. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.